top to bottom, I think just our skill set playing down the field a little bit more has increased, and we got some new faces in there between Jackson McGohan and Rob Booker and Grant Steck that bring a little bit different element of athleticism than I think we've had in the past here, which is really good. But I think just overall comfortability for some of those guys that are returning in the system, just creates confidence on the field, and you see some of that translate in the production. But obviously, just another year of growth and development has been really good for us.
Luke also said that in this offense, the tight ends probably undergo the biggest change from what they faced in high school.
Sure.
I'm guessing the returning guys, it's easier for them, but what's that like for the freshmen or McGohan coming from LSU, which is, I don't know how different that system was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun system to be a tight end in because you're involved in every element of the offense. I mean, we're not cutting down your route tree. We're not asking you to do things that maybe an offensive lineman could do. I mean, you got to do all of it, right? So I think mentally you have to have a really good foundation of how you start introducing defensive football first, then how you introduce the system holistically, and then trying to give it in bite-sized pieces throughout, when we have the OTAs, when we have contact periods in the winter. That's really important. So can it be a little boring for some of the older guys, of course, but we all start from the start every single year and kind of go from there.
Last year, the leading receiver at the position had 11 catches. Obviously, it was a big year of transition for everybody,
Sure.
But what have you learned about how you can get more production out of the position offensively this season?
Well, I think every year, as an offensive staff, we have to make decisions about what gives our team the best chance to win. You know what I mean? And probably last year what that meant was giving the ball to two really good running backs and using some of the skill set of the quarterback and his feet and leaning on those guys up front. Our hope is now that we can get maybe some two tight end sets out there like we talked about earlier. We've got some more dynamic guys in the room. So can we put defenses in conflict by putting big people out there, but also being able to utilize some of that spread passing game to get bigger defensive bodies on the field. So we've got a number of creative ways, and we got to put guys in situations to see if they can win one-on-one matchups. And that's something we'll continue to figure out through the spring.
Nate, you mentioned athleticism, among other things. Just what has stood out with Jackson so far, and how have you liked kind of its adjustment here? Yeah,
I mean he obviously is a dynamic player, which is awesome for us. We got to get his weight up a little bit for sure. He knows that. But what I've appreciated about Jackson is I think the environment holistically, academically, athletically, everything that's expected of him is pretty different from what the expectation was from where he came from. He's handled that with poise, handled that with grace. I mean, there's obviously going to be up and downs with younger kids, new guys. But he's done really well on that front.
I'll say when it comes to Jackson too, with the weight, just how much are you looking for him to game it? But how are you trying to reconcile that with maintaining that dynamic ability too?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of my role is we got the best strength and conditioning staff in the country. They give us a lot of guidance on that. Obviously, Miss Sophie with her nutrition plan. Right now for him, just the idea is let's gain some weight. You know what I mean? So it's not like he's going to take off and all of a sudden be 255 pounds and can't run, right? So we're going to kind of let nature take its course right now, force feed him a little bit. And if we ever do get to a situation where, hey, you got too heavy or lost a step, we obviously adjust course on that.
Given that Nowakowski and Ashcraft at least have some experience in this offense, what must they provide the rest of the spring camp and perhaps early in the season next year on and off the field?
Yeah, I think, I guess what I'll say about both those guys is they have made tremendous growth from a leadership standpoint. Those are the two guys in the room that guys look to for answers, for helping with problem solving, things like that. So that's the first thing. That's been an overarching theme from Coach Fickle top down. Is the leadership in this organization has to increase, and both those guys have stepped up, obviously in different ways. Tucker's still a young guy, but shepherding some of those really young guys, a more comfortable voice maybe than coming to see the coach every time has been really encouraging. And I'll just say this about Riley Nowakowski. I mean, he's answered every bell that we've asked him. He's really set a very high standard in our room. And I think a lot of those young guys are trying to elevate their game to match that. It's a really tough task right now for him. But both those guys bring different skill sets. Tucker's kind of a longer guy. He's a little bit more of a down the field threat as well. We're kind of hoping he's that complete guy. But Riley, I'll tell you what, for a kid who came in as a walk-on, has moved positions quite a bit. I mean, he's got true grit. I mean, he's worked and grinded at his craft, and you've seen some of the production out there in the passing game as well. So, our hope is that we get guys that, while they may have different skill sets, that we're not having to change personnel because, hey, maybe now we're having to pass, now we're having to throw. We want complete tight ends that can do all the jobs, and both those guys really elevated their game to help do that.
You mentioned getting more dynamic and athletic. Riley is not a tall, long guy who's going to
Sure.
run a 4.44.
Sure.
What does he have to do to compensate for those deficiencies or not having those gifts to help you guys be productive?
Well, the top thing is you got to play with tremendous effort. He does that every day. You know what I mean? And that's, he has an unbelievable attitude coming in. You're never going to go from a 4.8 to a 4.3, right? And I think you have to manipulate your game, whether that's in space, whether it's in the box, no matter where you find yourself, to be able to get those jobs done. You know what I mean? And that's been something that's fun as he comes up to the office quite a bit. 10-minute meetings just talking about finer details because he's got that, maturity. He's got that football intelligence because of his experience. So that's been a lot of fun to be a part of.
Physically, Grant Steck looks really impressive for a freshman.
Yeah.
To be where he's at. What is your impression of his performance so far, and what he needs to do to improve it, put himself in that position?
Yeah, I mean, came in I think at like 6'6", 260 pounds, and looks good doing it. He maintained the weight, but you've seen his body change. I think with all those young guys, and particularly early enrollees, there's just a confidence factor that's got to take place. They're learning so much. They're drinking through a fire hose when they first get here, that you got to just find your small victories throughout the day, right? And he's done that pretty much day over day. Now, we could list a number of things he's got to improve on, right? His run game, footwork, right? How he approaches the passing game, alignment, shifts, trades, motions, things like that. So he has everything to improve right now. But everything we've put in front of him, he's done a really good job attacking, and really proud of where he's at right now.
With Booker, too, it looks like he's been out for the past 3 practices or so.
Yeah.
But, do you foresee him returning in this spring? But also, what does he bring to that room as well in terms of complementary to the others in the room, too?
Absolutely, yeah. So, Rob got dinged. We do expect him back at some point this spring. Not entirely sure what the timeline is on that. But, he's a long, rangy kid, really good athlete, but probably a little bit underdeveloped in the weight room. Another guy who's got to focus on his weight and strength. That was something I was really pleased with. Kind of coming in, where was he going to be in that room down there, kind of his development piece. And he really impressed, I think, a lot of people with his working habits and how he approached the game. But again, those young guys, man, it's so difficult to project, with what they're going to look like because their bodies change so quickly. They're in a week they'll gain 6 pounds, and then their movement skills change a little bit out there. So we're very excited about the 2 guys we brought in. They're doing a great job, and hopefully, like we said, we'll get Rob back here pretty soon.
No, it's probably in part because of what Tucker's going through injury-wise, but we've seen JT run quite a bit with the first team.
Sure.
He was a guy that came out of high school running like a wing tee kind of option,
Right.
Didn't throw too often. How do you think he's learned, especially this kind of increased role of the passing game the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think he's done really well. The thing that we talk with about JT and really everybody in the room is there's a level of urgency that's required, to be able to play over play. We don't want to be in a situation, you guys watch us play, we want to increase the tempo that we're playing with so that, that requires some physical conditioning, that requires a lot of mental fortitude as well. And with all of those younger guys, and even though JT's been here for a little while now, he's still a younger guy, and particularly only his second year in the system. Got a couple reps in some of our heavier packages. So I'm very excited about his athleticism. He's continued to grow in the weight room. He's continued to develop his body into more of a football player than a transition basketball player coming out of high school. So he's put himself in a really nice position. And obviously, like you mentioned, there's been some injuries, so there's been more opportunity for him. And I think for the most part, he's capitalized on that.
You guys often work in tandem with the offensive line. So what has been the change from one coach to now AJ Blazek in town?
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. I'm sure you guys have witnessed some of that. He's an incredibly smart coach, and I think you've seen some of the development happen right there in a really short amount of time. I think you see a level of commitment from the offensive line that maybe even, I'm not even talking last year, just in the past when we first got here that maybe we weren't experiencing. I think those guys have really, forged a pretty deep brotherhood in that room. That's fun to see. That's fun to be a part of when you're, kind of on the backside of everything like the tight end is.
With Tucker and just not being able to do everything, just especially as a true freshman going into the second year, just what can he learn right now? What can he pick up while maybe not necessarily getting on the field
right.
as much?
Well, that's the great thing is in the meeting rooms we get a good amount of time with them to be able to pick their brain a little bit. Hey, you're not on the screen, but tell me what Riley's doing wrong here. What's he doing well? having individual meetings with those guys, and then we get him into some of the pre-practice run-through, some of the stuff throughout the course of practice that's a little bit toned down, so we can still keep him mentally engaged. But that's what I've been most impressed about with Tucker is, I mean, he's totally transformed his body, but he got thrust into a situation where he probably shouldn't have been playing. You're talking about getting here, I think, June 11th as an enrollee, and you're playing in a week 1 game, pretty significant reps. So, he was swimming at times out there. I mean, probably, I don't like the word fair, life isn't fair, but, probably wasn't fair to him, but he was what we had to go with. And I think those experiences, some of that adversity he faced in year 1, has really elevated his working habits to what he has to do mentally to prepare for, being a featured role in our offense.
With such a young group, with a lot of young players, obviously Riley who's there as a senior, but is there maybe an urgency to accelerate the development so that you can kind of play in year 1, and maybe what's the process of doing so?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. We got a very young room, which, is really exciting to me as a coach, right? Because number one, there's a lot of teaching to do, there's a lot of learning to be had, but you're seeing the development day over day. But to your point, I think if you're sitting in that room and you're looking around the room, there's a lot of young guys that are, at similar stages of development or age or grade or whatever it may be. So, if you're a competitor, I think you're chomping at the bit to, just like you said, accelerate your development and give yourself an opportunity to help our team.
With guys maybe not being as complete of a product, maybe in year 1, is there maybe a certain skill set you're looking for as to who ultimately kind of plays from the early on?
No, we're still a long way away from knowing what, the complexion of the offense looks like, from, what scheme is going to be best for us and what people are going to be best for us within those schemes. So I think we got a long way to go before we make any kind of decisions on that.
Jackson was committed to Cincinnati for about a year.
Yeah.
What stood out in his high school tape? Why was he such a high level?
Yeah, he was making incredible plays. I mean, if you turn on his high school highlights and watch his high school tape, played in a really good league there in Dayton, Ohio, and was for 2.5 years really, really, really productive. Played really good competition. We liked how he went out there when we watched him. He's more of a quiet kid by nature, but when you got him on the field, you can see him light up. You can see his personality come out a little bit, and that's what was exciting for us. Is you can recruit a lot of really good players, really good talent. But if they don't have the makeup, right, the desire, the want to get better, they're going to struggle in this organization, or in that one when Coach Fickle was there. So that's what we love, just how he approached the game. And then you saw just the natural athletic ability that was really compelling with a frame that we thought could grow.
We often talk about the damage that running backs take, but tight ends are asked to do everything. So what's the secret for keeping a guy fresh 8, 9, 10 games into the season?
Yeah, if you had me mic'd up on a day-to-day practice, the last message is like, I'm very big on routine. You know what I mean? Like between being a student athlete at a school like this and all the social things that are pulling at you and different obligations these guys have nowadays, you got to be able to have a solid routine you fall back on. So I think there's, that's how do I approach my academics? How do I get in the training room every single day? My weight's got to stay up, you know what I mean? So my body stays strong. I'm not, becoming fragile and things like that. Now, it's a tough position. It's a tough game. Things naturally happen. So you can do all the recovery and rehab in the world that you want that's preventative, but sometimes things happen. But for the most part, it's trying to help those guys, particularly the younger ones, learn how to be a mature college football player. And part of that's how they set up their day over day, week over week. And, we've seen pretty good success with that for the most part.
With the young room and maybe open competition, has there been anything that's kind of surprised you through the first 2 weeks of spring?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, it's a young room, so you go into every single practice, with, I guess, a mindset that anything could happen. And when good things happen, it's great. When maybe some things you wish didn't go that way do happen, you're not panicking or freaking out or anything like that. You just understand that the room is young, they're developing, and that you got to have that mindset as a coach going in each day, like, hey, we're going to have to clean things up multiple times. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are going to have to make mistakes, and that's okay. But from surprises, no, I'm not very surprised. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, right? Like, I've been very pleased where the guys are at, but nothing outstanding, I'd say.
One more here for Coach.
When it comes to on the recruiting trail for the upcoming classes, just what are you looking for as a tight ends coach for tight end prospects, and how much
Sure.
how has that changed even from maybe the offense that was run, when you're at Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think there's always, there's a size profile that's you got to require, right? Obviously, if they don't fit that size profile, you hope they have a skill set that, supersedes what you need from that end, okay? So, but what we're always going to look for is long guys that we feel like have the ability to grow, but also have the athletic ability that we think can do some of the things that we're asking them to do now. So what is that? What's that matrix? It's not a perfect science, but when we watch the tape and we get to know people, that's become a much bigger part of the process here. Is trying to evaluate the person first. You know what I mean, to make sure that they're going to fit what we're looking for here.